Hello. In this video, we are going to get the snake, or we're going to look for collisions between the snake and the flower. And if we can detect that, then we will add a certain amount to our max length variable, and we should be able to see the snake get longer as we hit the flower. Also, when this collision happens, we're going to have to move the flower, so we're going to have to generate some random numbers. But also make sure that those new random numbers we generate are lined up with our 4x4 grid that we're kind of constraining the player to. But this is really actually not that hard and pretty easy to do. So let's go take a look at that. I'm going to pop over to my code here and let's check. We know that the player is always going to be lined up with the we're going to make our flower lined up with this 4x4 grid. So if there's going to be a collision with the player and the flower, it's going to happen when the player is lined up with the grid. We could do the check outside of here, or we could do it up here. I guess it really doesn't matter, but let's we'll put it in here. So we'll say check for collision with the flower. So the flower we'll make sure that our flower is always lined up with our grid. And so when we say, okay, if the player's lined up with the grid, now there's a possibility that the player is colliding with the flower. So let's let's figure out how that's going to work. So that's going to be an if statement. If the player's position equals the flower's position, that's all we're going for here. So that's going to be an if statement. So if the player's x is equal to the flower's x, and that's just in Lua, that's just the word and. No double ampersand there, just the word and the player's y coordinate is equal to the flower's y coordinate, well, that's it. Then they hit. Oh, great. Yeah, there's my friend asking me why my arm is in a sling and in what way have I injured myself now. Yes. Okay. Thanks, Daryl. Nice to know you're keeping tabs on me. So what do we do if we hit the flower? Well, let's add one to the score. Hit the flower. We'll say score plus equals 1. That means add 1 to the score. And then let's move the flower somewhere else. So the flower has got to be put on a new coordinate that lines up with that the 4x4 grid. So how do we do that? Well, if we take the width of the screen, which is 128 pixels, and divide that by the size of the flower, which is 4 pixels, we get 32. So there's 32 columns where the flower could be. So if we just pick one of those columns, a number between 0 and 31, inclusive, and then multiply it by 4, which is the size of the column in pixels, we'll end up with a coordinate that's lined up with our grid. So now we just have to remember how to do random numbers. And if we go back to the cheat sheet, it's under math. We're going to need floor and rand. So rand gives you a number back, but it's a decimal number. It's got like a decimal point in it. So we want to get rid of the decimal point. That's what floor does. So it basically just chops off the decimal point. So let's say that we want a number between 0 and 32, and we want to turn that into an integer. So that's going to be the floor of that, and then times the size, and that's going to scale it up to be to our grid. Now, the y coordinate of the flower is just a little bit trickier because we don't want the flower to appear up here in the score bar at the top. So we want something between like 2 and 32. So how do we do that? Well, let's pick a number between 0 and 30, and then add 2 to it, and then take the floor of that. Will that work? Give me a number between, that'll probably work. Yeah, that'll work, I think. All right. And then we're not actually setting the player's X there. We're going to set the player's Y. So move the flower to a new grid-aligned coordinate. And then also move the... we just moved the flower. So what else? So, well, we need to make the trail longer. Move the flower. And make the trail longer. Make trail longer. And that's our max trail length variable. Let's add 4 to it because that's how many. That's our grid. Oh, you know what? Size. There you go. You should use these magic. Use these constants wherever possible. Makes your code a whole lot more readable. Now let's just test it out and see if it works. Whee! Oh, look at that. Ooh, and notice that our flower is nicely grid aligned. We pick which column we want it to be in, and then we multiply that column times 4 to scale it up to be in pixels, which is what we draw in. So now we've got, and you can see that the snake is in fact getting longer every time we hit a flower. So now the next, we're almost there. The next thing is we just need to add the collision checking between the boundary of the screen and then also with the trail of the snake. So what we're going to do for that is we are going to loop through every element in our list of tail segments, and we're going to compare them to the player's position. Except we have to be careful because there are going to be some segments that are right behind the head of the snake that the player is going to be in contact with, but that's not a collision that we care about. So we're going to have to just be a little bit clever about how we do our collision detection. But I think we're basically there. We've almost got it. So in the next video, we'll get the collision detection going, and at that point, we'll have a workable game. All right. See you in the next one.